On December 19th, 2019, the House of Representatives approved H.R. 5430, the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement Implementation Act, and they did so with a large bipartisan majority, 385 to 41. Now I have two questions about that vote. One, why? And two, does anybody really care about the Constitution anymore? So we'll discuss that next on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from a long through line of everyday Americans.
Hello there, everyday Americans. Paul Engel here with the Constitution Study, where we read and study the Constitution and teach the rising generation to be free. I'm glad you could join me. I'm hoping you're having a good 2020. As I said before, this should be an interesting year. As always, I'm going to point you to the website, constitutionstudy.com, so you can find out everything that I'm doing. I have some plans for 2020 that I hope you'll find very interesting there. One of the things I'm looking for are people who are willing to help. People who are willing to help spread the word about the Constitution, what we're trying to do here, about the importance of educating and understanding the Constitution for ourselves, as we'll see becomes important as we talk about today's message. But I'm also looking for people to help me not just get the word out, but help support the work that we're doing here. So if you are willing to help, or if you know some places where I could help spread the message, you want to help me spread that message, please contact me. You can either contact me through the website, or you can email me, paul@constitutionstudy.com. Please let me know. 2020, I think, is going to be a very important year, both for the nation and for the Constitution Study. So if you can help, I'd appreciate that greatly. With that, let's talk a little bit about this USMCA Implementation Act. Now, I've written previously about the constitutional issues with the USMCA, but that's not what I'm talking about today. I'm talking about H.R. 5430. Now, according to the text of the legislation, quote, "The purpose of this act is to approve and implement the agreement between the United States of America, United Mexican States, and Canada." Now, if your response to this vote is, so what? Or even if it's yippee, well, please follow along because there's some issues going on here. The definition of a treaty is an agreement, league, or contract between two or more nations or sovereigns, formally signed by commissioners, properly authorized, and solemnly ratified by the several sovereigns or the supreme power of each state. Now, euphemisms aside, the USMCA is a treaty. It's an agreement between two or more nations, United States, Mexico, and Canada. Now, for it to be valid in U.S. law, it must be made in accordance with the treaty clause of the Constitution. He, being the President, shall have power by and with the advice and consent of the Senate to make treaties, provided 2/3 of the senators present concur. So as I said, for a treaty to be legally entered into by the United States of America, it has to be made by two parts of the U.S. government, the President and the Senate. Notice who's not included in the treaty-making process: the House of Representatives. So my first question is, why? Why did the House spend time and effort and money to investigate, debate, and vote on a resolution to approve and implement a proposed treaty? Well, the reason is included in the text of the resolution. Pursuant to Section 106 of the Bipartisan Congressional Trade Priorities and Accountability Act of 2015 and Section 151 of the Trade Act of 1974. So what are the Bipartisan Congressional Trade Priorities and Accountability Act of 2015 and the Trade Act of 1974? We see they are federal laws for implementing trade agreements. Find that interesting? See 19 U.S.C. 2191, bills implementing trade agreements on non-tariff barriers and resolutions approving commercial agreements with communist countries. And 19 U.S.C. 2191, implementation of trade agreements. See, Congress effectively rewrote the treaty clause of the Constitution, inserting the House into the treaty-making process, while at the same time limiting Congress's involvement in making changes to these treaties as long as they're called trade agreements. So I said effectively rewrote because legally these laws are void. There is no position which depends on clearer principle than that every act of a delegated authority contrary to the tenet of the Commission under which it is exercised is void. No legislative act, therefore, contrary to the Constitution can be valid. To deny this would be to affirm that the deputy is greater than the principal, that the servant is above his master, that the representatives of the people are superior to the people themselves, that men acting by virtue of powers may do not only what their powers do not authorize, but what they forbid. Now, hopefully you recognize that from Federalist 78, Alexander Hamilton. Since the Constitution states that treaties made by the President with the advice and consent of the Senate is the law, any legislative act to change this cannot be valid. Now, in the early days of our republic, this was understood. Thus, the particular phraseology of the Constitution of the United States confirms and strengthens the principle supposed to be essential to all written constitutions, that a law repugnant to the Constitution is void, and that courts as well as other departments are bound by that instrument. That's the infamous Marbury versus Madison opinion. So what we have here is an illegal resolution supported by illegal laws and allowed to stand due in no small part to our general ignorance of the Constitution itself. Now, you may be asking, what's the big deal? Sure, Congress spent time and money working on this legislation, but that's only a drop in the bucket of the time and money Congress wastes on foolish legislation each and every year. What makes this one such a big deal? What makes it a big deal is how few people are talking about a trade agreement process that is repugnant to the Constitution. Have we really fallen so far that we really don't care what Congress does or how they go about doing it? Are we so enslaved to what others say we don't even recognize when the most basic aspects of our governing system, the separation of powers, is actively eviscerated? If Congress can do what the Constitution forbids, we are truly subjects of a federal aristocracy. And if the simple words of the Constitution are no longer to be used to limit governments, what limits are there? How can we call ourselves a constitutional republic if the Constitution has no power at all? How can we call ourselves a land of the free if we are mere servants of those in Washington, D.C.? Are we still the home of the brave if we are too afraid to stand up to our employees and demand they uphold their oaths of office? Has our experiment in self-government failed? Or will there yet be a renaissance of liberty in this great nation? Will the people once again take the reins of power over our elected officials and hold them accountable? Only time will tell. So what do you think about that? Here's a simple piece of legislation, all but ignored by much in the news, that literally overturns the concept of our Constitution. That takes the idea that we, the people, tell the federal government what it is and is not allowed to do, how it is and is not going to work, and we let the government tell us how it's going to work. And nobody says anything about it. Because, to be honest, most people I talk to, they don't even realize it. They don't realize that this type of legislation, while it seems relatively innocuous, whether you're for or against the USMCA, by inserting the House into the treaty-making process, we effectively take the Constitution, wad it up, and throw it in the corner. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because you and I and everyone else, when we see this stuff happening, we are going to our representatives going, what are you doing? You swore an oath or you affirmed an oath to support the Constitution, which does not give the House any say in treaties. Now, if we want the House to have a say in treaty, all we have to do is amend the Constitution. But no, we don't want to do that because, well, that would be hard. So ask yourself today, go check, was your representative one of the many who voted for this? Whether you like USMCA or not, the fact that Congress has put the House of Representatives in the middle of the treaty-making process is a violation of the Constitution, and the fact that we let it happen, usually without a word, means we don't rule anymore. We, the people, are no longer the sovereigns in this country because we've set it aside, we found it too difficult or too time-consuming, or just not worth picking up and doing our job. And that to me says a lot more about the society and the people of the United States of America than it does at all about our government. So hopefully you'll find this interesting. Again, head over to the website, constitutionstudy.com. Tell me what you think. Leave a comment. Leave it on Facebook. Leave it on YouTube. Consider not simply the language and whether or not you are for or against USMCA, but whether or not the ends justify the means. Are we going to ignore bad behavior in our Congress because, well, we're getting the legislation that we want? Hopefully that made you think. Hopefully you'll come by next time. We'll discuss something else next time on the Constitution Study.
Go down the road and call it home. Put it all on a little piece of land. Pay the bills, stay out of jail. Love the neighbors and have a few good friends. Every day